one of the things that I always have appreciated about you all, having done some co-investments in past lives and just your reputation in the industry, the hard work. What are examples of the hard work, like real examples?
We're going to dish this to Chetan because I know a story.
Yeah, I know you have a story here, a very recent one.
This
but
guy got
like
off
the
a
aunts and uncles
plane.
are not going to do anymore.
For the screen.
What are the ways in which you get put to work by your portfolio companies, Chetan?
Yeah. Well, Chetan, and part of the reason he's discombobulated and has a cold brew in front of him, for those of you who are watching the video, at 5 p.m., is he got off an international flight 3 hours ago, or 4 hours ago.
But was with us on Monday.
Which was with us.
Decided to go.
And decided
At
to
11
go on Monday. Yeah. And today's Wednesday. So here we are, 48 hours
Listeners
later.
can do
Great.
the math.
I'm not as common. Yeah, I'm doing great.
So what are the circumstances that lead to you suddenly deciding that you need to be in Europe?
I think this is a great story of, how the firm and we as a group operate, which is, there was a portfolio company that was going through an important decision. And, there was a decision that was made Friday morning. It felt like there was a finality to that decision. It was like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then, people go to the weekend, emotions rise up, they have conversations with their friends, and, stuff starts to get off track. And I get a call, Sunday night. It's just like, things are getting off track. What do we do? And, we're all on a group chat. And so I put it immediately in the group chat that says, here's what's going on. I'm looking for advice. And it was late at night, and Eric called me at 11 or 11:30 p.m. And we talk for 30, 40 minutes where we're just walking through everything. And what was so incredible about that moment is when you're in it, it's really hard not to get wrapped up in the emotion and sort of stop thinking logically. And what was great about that conversation is Eric was able to zoom out and say, look, we're in the service of entrepreneurs. We only recommend and guide entrepreneurs. It's ultimately their company. It's their decision. And so what Eric said on the call is what I would do is, and what I know you would do is
That's some good
Here's the
inception.
peer pressure element.
is
I know you, Chetan, would do this,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, which is, if you weren't in the moment, you would make the phone call and say, hey, this is your decision. I'm here and 100% supportive no matter what. And so we got off the phone. I made that phone call.
But also, here's what I think.
Yeah, well, no, I think because you've gone through
The
all
think
of that.
part had already been done. Which
There
is
is no more thinking.
it's your
like,
call.
all
We're
the-
a sounding board. You make the call.
All the facts, all the reasoning, all of that had been laid out. There was no more logic and there was no more explanation required. It was, at this point, it was emotional. And, after that conversation with Eric, I made a call. I just said, it's your company.
So
I'm
that
here
was
to
Sunday
support
night.
you. This was Sunday night.
Then Monday
This is like-
partner meeting.
This was like midnight I made the call.
So you're all in the circle on Monday.
And so we come in Monday morning, we're talking. And then at some point during the conversation, Peter said, this is not a conversation that should happen on the phone or on Zoom. It needs to happen in person. I was like, okay, let's do it. Okay, yeah. And then I was like, okay, I should get on a plane right now. And so here we go, like time to go to San Francisco airport. And then as I was leaving, Eric goes, are you going to come back for the acquired thing? I was like, oh yeah, okay, don't worry, I'll find a way to
Not
get
only
back.
am I getting on a last minute flight to Europe, yeah.
And you have to come back by a certain hour on Wednesday. And what transpired was, as I was getting on the plane, that meant so much and set such a positive signal that by the time I landed, everything had just gotten in place. Like I didn't say anything, I didn't do anything, just showing that level of support and commitment changed sort of all the dynamics, which is like, hey, you actually meant what you said, that you're here to just support me and support us and support the team. And you're right, it is our decision. And that was it. It changed the tenor of the conversation completely.
I would say it's like also broadly a manifestation of like the orientation to investing, right? Like there's a lot of people who would say of investing, oh, like we made this bet. Like you might hear that word a bunch of times. Oh, like, well, it's a good bet, or it's a good risk-adjusted bet, or hopefully it'll be a good bet. And there's a very passive.
I'd like to own that asset.
Yeah, I'd like to own that asset.
It's investment banker speak.
Yeah. It's a metaverse play.
But it sort of like pervades a very passive view of almost like trying to super forecast a set of odds, and you did the diligence to super forecast those odds. And like we never talk in that way. It's like when we think about partnering with a founder, it's not, oh, we want to make a good bet. It's like we want to make a commitment. And that commitment manifests like as a group to be vulnerable and honest here and collectively get that feedback. And then with the founders to be on the field denting those odds, right? Each year, big years and even a couple times in every year, there's important moments where you can tell. You can't transform necessarily. We're not saying we got some silver bullet, but that commitment can really change the odds.
You know, each of us make one or two of these commitments a year.
Not bets.
And right, they're not bets. There's a level of relationship that then happens with the founders because there's only one or two a year. And what you end up feeling is that you really just care about every company that you work with and the founders and the teams and everything. And so when these moments happen, it's not a transactional thing of one of, you know, a lot of companies with which you work. It's, you know, a founder that you really work closely with, that you know so much about, and that, you know, that level of support doesn't feel like something unusual for us to do. It's something that we just expect of ourselves, and that's the relationship that we'll have with these teams.
Can I ask, and this may be, you know, drifting into an area that's harder to talk about, and so we can abstract it a little bit away. We talked about Uber on our episode, but I want to abstract it to, you know, how you think about this generally. The role of a general partner in a venture capital firm traditionally is that you have a fiduciary responsibility to your LPs to maximize their returns, and you have a second fiduciary responsibility when you join the board of a company to the company. And it's hairy enough trying to balance the trade-off, that because sometimes those things are at odds. You're representing all shareholders on the company's side, and with your LPs, you're representing, you know, their interests. And so you then introduce this third thing, which is the thing you care the most about, which is support of the founder and empowering the founder. When do those things get hard? How do you balance those things? I assume most of the time you're indexing strictly to, we're partnering with this founder and we trust them. But when do you have to juggle those things?
Yeah, I mean, it's people go to therapy often, they only talk about the shit that's going wrong. And I think it's useful to think about what's going right. And if there's not a DSM for flourishing, there's a DSM for dysfunctions. We could open that book up and we can have all sorts of flavors of dysfunctional family. And I think we could do that, and that would be illustrative and informative about how it can go wrong. I would flip it and say, when it works well, what are the preconditions of where you have alignment? And then you look at degradations from that. I think one of the words that's sort of vital to any durable founder benchmark partner relationship is vulnerability. And if there's ever caution or pause that I can't share this information with then we've degraded the relationship, and we have to fix that. And you fix trust is fixed intimately one-on-one. You have conversations that allow you to zoom up to say, okay, what's the collective purpose? And I think that we could talk about Uber. I have every reason to believe Travis's purpose was the biggest, most extraordinary Uber imaginable. And, you know, we had a collective gaze on that together. And in many situations, this was one of them, pathologies creep in. And you learn this through a course of firm experience, which is when you start to see that happening, you need to act immediately. Because the minute we get othered, and it's not about us and this joint purpose, but it's you and me, it's my agenda and my LP's agenda and all that. And I sadly see that with a lot of the other firms in the industry, because it's not necessarily the partner in the room that's got the issue. It's their partners that have told them that they need to do this or they need to do that. And I see it, I'm like, oh man, I adore you, but your partners I have different feelings about. And you're here trying to rattle because they've said, why aren't we meeting our plan? And so the entrepreneur immediately, vulnerability snaps like that and it closes. And then you have no trust. And now they come to us typically and they say, we got a problem with one of our directors. I'm like, okay. So we'll have an off sidebar with them and say, what's going on here? How can I help you with your partners? And as much as, you look at situations where it falls apart, let me give you an inverse story, which is where it really only could work, I think, in this firm model. I was on the board of a company that wrecked somewhere between $200 to $300 million of capital. And I'm pretty accountable. Now, I should be fired if this job actually had a standards and governance and practices, and that company's called Docker. And I was just in Miami yesterday at their all-hands meeting. And I remember the last time...
when you invested, it was called .cloud, right?
.cloud. So the last time I did an all-hands meeting at Docker was 3 years ago, and there were 60 employees that we'd spun out of the prior company, and the valuation was zero. So we'd gone from over $1 billion, $4 billion, $5 billion to zero. And I was working with some of the great venture capitalists in the industry on that company. And aside from Insight Partners, crickets, gone, all left, bailed. And this is okay. What was different with Benchmark? Insight's another story.
There's a very fun quote that we don't often talk about on the show. I don't think we ever talked about this on the show, but a very prominent firm has one of their mantra quotes is "focus on your winners," and I think that's what you're talking about here.
Yeah, and well, at this point, it was a pretty big loser, and but the vulnerability that I was able to have with the team that remained to say we made mistakes, we're accountable to it. Here's how we work through this. Because you know what? If you look up at the purpose of Docker, we're literally this is cliche. It's the beginning. We have 30 million developers that use this product every day.
That's the craziest thing. Unbelievable product success that completely changed the industry, but like business model and strategic failure such that there wasn't effective value capture.
There was value destruction, hundreds of millions of dollars of value destruction. My two partners, I came in and I said, I may be drinking my own bathwater. I don't know what to do here. I was really vulnerable. And I said, if I've gone off the deep end, no part of that truth-seeking exercise would allow me to spin, position, blame, be a victim. I was being accountable. And I said, what have I done? And they said, not only do we believe in this company, can we put it in the new fund too? And I thought, well, that's crazy. I was like, but you're right. If you believe, you have to have that founder level. We always joke, employees can quit. Founders can't unfound a company. Yeah. And I think we feel that way in our commitments. We can't uncommit that founder permanence. And oftentimes it outlives every executive that gets recruited. Not every, but like a hyper majority of executives. And so this case of flourishing, and then that was a case of, trust, all these things that come to stress, the LP's agenda, the founder's agenda, it's not that hard. You just look up and say, what's the purpose of the company? Let's resolve around that. And that'll sort the rest of the stuff out. It's the, Bezos thing, the long term, there really is no conflict between creating, delighting and wowing and
shareholder value.
Yeah. Impressing the customer and creating shareholder value. Our customer it's not the founder. We say it is, but it's really the purpose of the founder. Yeah. And it turns out that purpose, if that's the customer, one of us may be deviating from that and we can keep each other accountable. And that happens internally. My partner said, no, the purpose of Docker is just the beginning. My God, they're going to get developers to program the global computer. Okay. So then you could dust off $300 million of lost capital.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Sit me down, say it straight. Another story on the way. Who got the truth? Who got the truth now?